Some folks call it the greatest album ever made by the greatest rock and roll band of all time. Hey, it's Scott Sparks with Houston's Eagle, talking about the Beatles. They called it the sound of their alter egos, and now Sgt. Pepper is turning 50 years old. The album was released back June 1st, 1967, and the Fab Four spent 700 hours in the studio to make the masterpiece. It was unlike any other album before. From the cover, to the concept, to the experimental music. The band spent thousands on the album cover alone, which at the time was the most expensive ever made. It was the first rock album to win Album of the Year at the Grammys. And the album spent 15 weeks at #1 in America alone. In an interview with Rolling Stone magazine back in 1970, John Lennon said of the album, quote, "It was a peak. Paul and I were definitely working together." The BBC felt that the song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was a reference to LSD. But Lennon insisted it was inspired by a drawing from his 4-year-old son, Julian Lennon. He wrote the song A Day in the Life with the newspaper, the Daily Mail, propped up right there in front of him on his piano. And 2 solid songs recorded for the album, Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, ended up being released as singles, but never made it on the final album. It was among the very first concept albums. It paved the way for other concept albums like Dark Side of the Moon from Pink Floyd, The Grand Illusion from Styx. Over the decades, bands have tapped into that classic Beatles sound. Legendary bands like ELO, Cheap Trick, even Oasis. But nobody has done it like the Fab Four. And their anniversary edition comes out on Friday with a new stereo and surround sound mix.
After 50 years, you may think you know the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. But we wanted to get the rest of the story. So we turned to the Fab Five tribute band to find out how they made it all come together.
With Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, we hope you will enjoy the show.
We needed a break, you know.
Yeah, you even said on the flight, I'm not a Beatle anymore.
Did I say that?
You did?
He has much better memory than me.
So I thought, why don't we create an album and not be the Beatles? We can be someone else.
An in-flight meal for Paul led to a spicy idea.
The whole salt and pepper, became Sgt. Pepper. It was just kind of an idea that popped in my head.
The other members were on board too and wanted to take their sound to another level.
The Beach Boys in particular were doing so many unusual things vocally, and also the effects that they had on the album. And so when you listen to that stuff, it was just very inspiring. We just put our own twist on it, from our side of the pond.
And interestingly enough, one of the songs when I was in LA, got a ticket from a Mita maid by the name of Rita. So decided to write a song about her. Yeah, she was lovely. My favorite song.
Record producer Dan Workman runs the oldest recording studio in the United States, Houston's legendary Sugar Hill Studios, a landmark location that has hosted musical giants from Beyoncé to ZZ Top.
In recording Sgt. Pepper's, the Beatles used the recording studio as an artist would use a palette of color. They didn't see any limitation, and they decided that they were going to totally abandon being able to perform the songs live. And recording was never the same after that.
Dan still recalls hearing the album for the first time.
It was kind of easy to accept, but very radical. It sounded totally different than what I was hearing on the radio, and it made me want to be a Beatle, actually.
The studio work was unique for each Beatle.
Yes, a lot of sitting around I did, that's for sure. Chess, it's a wonderful game played against yourself.
There were 4 cellos in the studio, and I said, gosh, how come I can't play guitar? And you've got all these cellos. And Paul said, well, there's always room for cello.
And then there was the album cover.
It elevated the album cover to a piece of art instead of just a piece of information.
We wanted to, have colorful uniforms like a sergeant would be.
Getting all those dead people to line up behind us was really hard.
Yeah, that was. They wanted money.
I know.
The success blew everyone away.
I would say that my best way to measure the success would be my bank account.
So we did pay him then.
And how much longer will the Beatles' success continue?
It's going to continue for generations to come. I mean,
probably century.
You've got great melodies, great songs. That lasts a lifetime, you know.
And the reason the Beatles' music lasts is it produces one.
Sgt. Pepper's. If there's an artist out there that wants to release the next Sgt. Pepper, I'm available to produce it.
Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can I have a little more? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I love you.
During their 8 years together, the Beatles released 13 albums, but went on just one world tour in 1964 with 26 stops. The Fab Four have sold a whopping 1.6 billion singles in the U.S. and over 600 million albums worldwide.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The lovable Mop Tops had 20 #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Their debut album, Please Please Me, spent 30 weeks at #1 on the Billboard album chart. One, the remastered catalog of Beatles hits, sold 11.4 million copies worldwide, making it the best-selling album of the 2000s. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is their highest-selling album with 32 million copies sold worldwide. Yesterday is the most covered song of all time, with over 3,000 covers.
Trouble seems so far away.
Paul McCartney penned 32 #1 hits, while John Lennon wrote 26. And we can't forget the ladies. There are 18 songs that include a woman's name in the title.
That's the Beatles by numbers. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, Ringo.
Hello.